Hey there, boys and ghouls, and welcome to this week's episode of Hollow Weekly. And boy, was this an interview dream come true. We got to sit down with the guy who penned the slasher film that got me into horror movies. I always liked the Universal Monster stuff, the Halloween stuff, but this movie that this gentleman wrote got me into slashers like none other, and that is Todd Farmer, the writer of Jason X. He also wrote My Bloody Valentine 3D and Drive Angry. This guy can just bust out cult classics like it's his job. It was his job. Yeah, it was his job. He was a writer. And he did it successfully. And he was cool enough to sit down and talk to George and I for a little bit, talk about Jason X and all of his other cool stuff. So sit back, enjoy the show. Hey, and make sure to rate and review. 5 stars. Send this to your friends. We all love Jason X. We know you love Jason X. All right? So this is the episode you've been looking for. So sit back and enjoy the show.
I'm scared to death of one thing.
Excellent, excellent.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to us.
My pleasure.
This is sort of like, I was thinking like if Nick in 6th grade buying Jason X knew, right. So he'd be like, no, that's not going to happen. How would that happen?
One day I'll be standing in his tool shed. How could that be?
Very fitting.
Very totally fitting. Choose your weapon. This is so. We started this podcast a long time ago, and the first time I met Nick, who is my best friend, I was like, "What was your formative horror experience?" And he didn't even hesitate. He was just like Jason X, like not that even was... like it was crazy. Tell.
Okay, so 6th grade, like this is what changed me fundamentally. I still say to this day that if you need like a horror boot camp DVD, like you need to learn everything, buy the DVD, because not only do you get Jason X, but the special features behind the scenes, which was my first introduction to Joe Bob, who's now just burning it up.
Right.
Burning it up.
Yep.
What was I getting at with that? Just how crazy
no.
that experience was. Like I remember, because we were just talking to Aaron B. Kuntz from Scare Package on Saturday.
Yeah.
And we were talking about video stores, and one of the big moments I had was buying Jason X and Army of Darkness in the same night, not knowing what was about to happen.
Right, not knowing what you were in for.
What was about to happen. So just that experience, like that, people don't get that now. They don't get the blockbuster like just chancing it. Because I knew nothing about Jason going into this film. Right. This was my first, aside from the hockey mask and Halloween, like you knew that was a character, and so I was like, hockey mask. Right. This is the one. And to me, that was like, this is Jason. The other films don't count. Like to me, and people thought I was crazy. People thought I was crazy. I was like, you don't understand. I saw what I thought was going to be in the movie, bought the movie, and everything happened.
Right. That would have been the pull quote with the most swagger for you. Nick Rollins, none of the rest of the Fridays count.
On behalf of Cunningham Films, I would like to apologize. Personally.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm absolutely sure. So, I mean, we gotta know, like, what was it like? How did what's the capsule story of how that came about? How did you get involved? And then how did it get to the point of him in space? Because I heard there were different ideas before that one even came about.
I mean, I had befriended Dean Lorey over emails. Basically, Dean Lorey had put Jason in hell, so he did Jason Goes to Hell. And we had bantered back and forth story ideas, and I was living in Texas at the time. And he said, look, if you want to do this, you got to move out to LA. And within a couple of months of being in LA, he introduced me to Sean, and we all started talking. Sean had always wanted to work with Dean again. So the idea was Dean was going to direct something, Sean would produce, and I would write it. And then that's how I ended up working for Sean. And I worked there for 2.5 years before we even started talking about doing this. Freddy vs. Jason was in development at the time. And they were on like draft 7 or 8. And I even did a draft at one point, which they sent back, New Line sent back unopened, passing politely. It's just not for us, but they never opened the envelope.
Wow.
And,
what was your draft? What was the hook?
My draft was King Kong versus Godzilla. It was just a big event movie. It was just funny, goofy.
As it should be.
It wasn't scary. I don't think there was anything scary in it. It was just one set piece after another. And they didn't read it, so it doesn't matter.
Fair enough.
And but then Sean was rightfully frustrated, so he was like, "Let's just do a Jason movie." So we started bantering around ideas and ended up with this stupid idea.
Hey, so yeah, but here's the thing: once it's in space, you can get away with anything, which is one of the things I appreciate about that, right, Liz? Like, where are you going to go from hell?
They'd done everything else, and so this wasn't like Friday the 13th was never cookie cutter. It was they were always going somewhere different. I mean, the first movie is so very different from all the other movies.
Yeah,
and I mean, Jason fought Carrie with telekinesis. I mean, all of that was happening. So how crazy was it to go to space?
Right.
So, and I always thought just because of my love of Alien, space would work. I knew others hadn't worked, but I never occurred to me that we would not be brilliant.
Is there like a standout scene, or what was there a scene that like you just couldn't wait to write for Jason X? Like, what was the most exciting scene to knock out?
I mean, the funnest scene was the anti-gravity scene, which we never shot because it was too expensive. That was fun. I always loved the opening. I thought, finding the whole setup to the opening and then the class showing up, I always thought that was fun. And so, and it was much bigger back at the time because there were, I think when they got into the compound in whatever year it was, there were all these all these countermeasures came alive, all these security countermeasures to protect Jason. And so there were robotic spiders and all this stuff. But DeLuca had just done Lost in Space, and DeLuca, who was running New Line at the time, he was like, "Yeah, we ain't doing spiders. That was we're not doing it." We couldn't have afforded it anyway, so it was fine. That was fun.
Speaking of achievement unlocked, your words were coming out of David Cronenberg's mouth. That has to be kind of surreal, right?
My Cronenberg rewritten words were coming out of his mouth.
Oh, did he rewrite them?
He did. I mean, that whole "I don't want him frozen, I want him soft." That's total Cronenberg. I mean, Think about it. That's like right out of The Fly. That wasn't me. I just get to take credit for it. And I remember somebody called me. I don't remember who it was. Somebody's like, "Cronenberg's changing all your lines," and I'm like, "Okay." Why would you get mad at that?
Wow, he Orson Welles you. Like the third man, he took over the. Okay, all right.
I mean, that's just normal. I never was the princess when it came to dialogue because,
Right.
I mean, I've written my own dialogue and I get on set and I'm like, "No, it ain't working." So I change it while I'm there.
Right.
So I mean, you have to do that as an actor. You got to change it, and make it your own, and that's what he did.
That's super cool, actually. I think one of my favorite moments in any horror franchise thing is when Frozen Jason holding machete falls down and chops off. That is such genius. The fact that he's malevolent as a statue, like just transporting him is like
Highly dangerous.
Put him in a UPS truck, he'd fall out of it, destroy cars.
Final destination, the whole highway.
Totally. That was such a great touch. Good visual.
Speaking of visuals, like this movie has some of the best kill scenes too.
Yeah.
Like the frozen face one, just like that. Also, keep in mind, like that was like a first Jason film.
Right.
We got the cryogenic face slam. Everyone else had to deal with arrows through the neck.
Right.
My first impression, like, you want to see a face? Now it's gone.
Yeah.
What's it like writing those kill scenes? Like, how do you come up with them? And like, were there any that didn't make it into the movie because they were too violent?
No, I mean we didn't really cut anything. There were a few frames. There was a scene where you come back and find the pilot is dead, and there's just some gore shots.
Mm-hmm.
Trimmed a few of those, but for the most part, everything stayed. What's interesting about the face freeze, if you compare that to, say, Janessa getting sucked out of the hole in the
Mm-hmm.
That's horrible compared to the face freeze. The reason the face freeze, the way they pulled that off, it's just genius. The idea was great, but had they not pulled that off the way they did, nobody would remember it. I mean, it could have looked horrible, but it looks fantastic.
And how did they pull it off that well?
I have no idea. I wasn't there.
Wow.
I was there for about a week because the first shot of me coming through the little virtual reality thing,
Yep.
that was day one.
Oh.
And so once they were done with me, they shipped me off so I wouldn't be in the way. And then Dean Lorre and I came back maybe 3 weeks into the shoot to do some rewrites, but we were locked in the hotel room the whole time. So
I mean, I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of another horror movie kill that's been Mythbustered. Like they did a whole episode on the face freeze, right?
Yeah, which apparently doesn't work.
I think so much of Mythbusters. That definitely works. It looked like it worked like a charm. I don't know what they're talking about. But that's a really like high honor there. You got the one fact checked kill in the history of horror. Horror's done the craziest shit for like almost a century, if not a full century. I'm trying to remember. Thomas Edison's Frankenstein was like 1800s, but like you're the only fact checked kill. That's messed up.
That's a high honor.
That's a Guinness record kind of moment.
So as a writer, because I didn't know this about screenwriters, because I was like, I didn't know that you could just go and like read scripts and learn how to write, like, and figure out how to do it. I always thought like you just pin a movie, like that's how. Are there any scripts that you read that like gave you the tools that like built a foundation for you that like you remember reading, or like,
or you read a screenplay and you're like, oh, I'm doing this. Like this.
Well, there were two. I bought. I don't know what year it was. It would have been 90s, but I bought I bought a book that had two screenplays. It was by Quentin Tarantino, and it was Reservoir Dogs and True Romance. And I thought I wanted to write novels at the time, and so I read those, and I was just like, it just blew my mind. The simplistic way of telling a story, where it's just dialogue and just action. There's no fluff. Just get to the point, get it done. And they blew my mind. And at that point, I started calling around, who do I know that was doing this? And a friend of a friend had gone to school with Dean Laurie, and that's how I hooked up with him. But it was Reservoir Dogs. Reservoir Dogs was the first one I read, and hadn't seen the movie. True Romance I had seen, which was a completely different screenplay than the movie.
Yeah.
wow.
So it just blew my mind as to how, like, I wanted the answers. I wanted to know how that screenplay became the movie that we ended up seeing. So it just
he is his name even on True Romance? I can't remember. Did he take his credit off that, or did he leave it as a writer? Or something weird happened there.
But it was what I read, and it may not have been from the book. I know I'd read it. I read both versions at one point. I can't remember which one was in the book, but it was, it was all out of order. It was like Pulp Fiction.
Sure.
And
you picked the right shirt for this interview, Nick.
Bam.
well, yes, you did. But it was that's the screenplay that put me in the arena.
True Romance would do it. I remember the day I saw True Romance. I remember the weather. I remember, like, it's one of those vivid. Once you get to the like Dennis Hopper, Christopher Walken scene, like it's just watching them do that back and forth is like life changing.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
I can remember I was hanging around with Thomas Jane for a period of time, and he was married to Patricia Arquette. And I remember at some point we were over there working on something, I think one of the comic books, and she came in the room and brought us a bunch of food, and I was just like, "You're so cool." And she gave me that look. Like I've never heard that before. And then
she'd probably be happy to hear it now.
What's that?
She'd probably be happy to hear it now.
I think she and I are we battle Trump in the same arena.
Oh yeah, that's right. Go ahead.
Oh, so like I was talking to George before this, and I was like, it's got to be a kind of surreal being killed in a horror film like that. It's got to be crazy to know that like I'm gonna have Jason's head on my head slamming against the wall. The film crew's gonna get this, and then forever and ever and ever, I'm gonna have a kill by Jason. How is it filming a kill scene? Like how's that work?
It is everything you think it is. It's incredible. Granted, it's slow because filming is very slow. You think you go in and do it, but you're there all day long. But just the idea of what you're becoming a part of, that's huge in itself. And I can't remember if it was Jim Isaac or Cunningham who asked me, "Do you want to be in it?" Which it never even occurred to me. Sure. I had done plays in college and crap like that, but it just didn't. And so I was like, "Yeah," and they were like, "Who do you want to play?" And so I was thinking, because it was a small part, and I thought, well, one of the grunts. I'd play Dallas because he's got the biggest role. I know it's a dick move, but still, it's a fun role. And so what was great is that Kane wouldn't let me do the actual close-up hit because he's, Kane's a nut, but he's also a very professional stuntman. So he was like, no, there could be an accident. We're going to bring this guy in. And so if you remember the beginning of X-Men, Wolverine's fighting this big bald dude in the cage. Well, that bald dude was the guy who came in to sort of be the head that smashes into the wall. And so there was this hole cut in the wall and this fabric over it. And so you just hit that hole. Well, he missed, completely shattered his nose. And so when it was over, Kane was like, see? Like, no, I don't see. I would have hit the hole.
It would have been me there forever. I would have done it right.
But it was fun. So that, and then followed that with Bloody Valentine and Drive Angry. I just die in everything.
Yeah, that's true. What was your impression of so Kane Hodder? Like, when you play a role so many times, what's the difference between the first time you play it and later on in the series? Is there any difference, or is he just basically channeling, like going in a time machine and kind of recapturing what he was doing the first times?
I mean, the great thing about Kane is that there had been a long time that there was no Friday the 13th. And he had been doing the convention circuit, and he basically kept the character and the franchise alive as far as I was concerned. So he had time to sort of figure out who Jason was. And I can remember him being on set. There was a scene where the robot KM knocks him down, and the cameras were on him, and he was supposed to get up, and he was like, no. He said, we never see Jason get up. Like, he had this idea in his head, because it demystifies him when you see some guy awkwardly trying to get up off the floor.
Sure.
You know, to see it, which makes a lot of sense. So the next time you see him, he's walking again. I thought it was really smart. I didn't think of it.
No, that's super smart.
It would have been 35 minutes of him just getting up over and over.
Taking Advils.
Yeah, I've already seen Michael Myers Drive. I don't want to see.
Right.
I don't want to see Kane Hodder getting up from a prone
Hold his
position,
back.
doing the sound. Yeah, no, that's actually really genius. I'm all for that. The reveal of Uber Jason. First of all, was that what you called him on set, or is that a nickname that came after?
I mean, at some point, Sean Cunningham started calling him Uber Jason.
Okay.
But I don't remember what he was referred to in the script, or what. Just upgraded. I don't know what it was, but.
Because a lot of times, that reveal moment is just botched. There's a lot of movies where it's kind of like when the Poltergeist remake, where they show the clown for the first time, and you're like, come on. But this one, when he came out, it was everything I wanted it to be. Like, I don't know how they pulled that off, but his look, his style, like the style, like all of that, the context that he was revealed in, and then just the whole rest of the crew that was left, and you're in your head, you're like, how's he gonna do that one? How's he gonna do that one? Like, it was such a great moment. How did they pull that off so well?
I mean, well, for starters, you've got Stefan who designed RoboCop, so you can see the similarities in the design. And because the image that I always had was the one from Mean Machine, from the Stallone movie, Judge Dredd.
Oh yeah.
So it was more, what I envisioned in my head was just more painful, metal and flesh merged together that looks like it would not feel good. But
Sure.
when you've got Stefan, obviously you're gonna go that direction, and I love the design. What will always be disappointing is that everyone already knew the design before they saw the movie. So
Right.
I mean, it was on the poster, and it was in the trailer, and it was never in my head. It was never designed to be that. It's the end of the movie. It's you've been in it for 60 plus minutes when that reveal happens. So it was supposed to feel like KN killed him and the movie was over. And so I think if that had happened, it would have made a better experience. But
Oh, definitely for sure. And there was a release thing, right? It accidentally was released, or something happened with Germany. What was the story of that? How did it come out in advance?
wait, say that.
Or do I have that wrong? How did people know
the pirating part? Or
Yeah.
Because there was certainly some pirating that.
Yeah, the pirating part, because a lot of people sort of had seen the movie, or seen
Yeah, a lot of
parts
people
the movie.
because pirating, I mean, it wasn't even called that back then. It was just you could download it. It took 17 hours, but you could download it.
Wow.
And it was a bit. I remember seeing, I think it was Pirate Bay, or I guess it was called Pirate, but it was a big download at the time. At least I'd seen somebody mention that. But a lot of people had seen it. A lot of people knew about Uber Jason, and plus it was all over the trailer and so on.
Pirate Bay.
That's old.
LimeWire just popped in.
Kaza.
Wow. That's.
Well, I paid for mine, so I will.
Yeah, you did.
I was not part of the problem.
You were, yeah, no, you didn't cause any of that. You didn't cause any of the problems there. What is it like to write for 3D, if it's any different?
At first, it wasn't any different because we didn't know what it meant. What we thought was Friday the 13th 3D, Jaws 3D. We stuff flying at your face. We didn't think of it in the immersive thing that it is now. Right. And it wasn't until actually we were on set and we start seeing some of the images come back that we were like, holy crap. I mean, the things that you can do and the ideas that you can put the audience inside the drama. And that's what I loved about it. There was a point in Valentine where the miner basically pickaxes a door, and you just suddenly, as the hole opens up, just the world opens up in there. It was kind of amazing. It just didn't. So yeah, we started, probably every kill was redesigned. A lot of those from Gary Tunnicliffe, who was the effects blood guy. And he's a part of the band and always will be because he does everything with us now. But his brain works that way, so he's always thinking blood and gore. So I think the shovel through the head, all of that was, that's scary. And so we rewrite it in time and just fix it, make it happen.
That is so cool. I mean, that's probably my favorite modern 3D horror. Use of 3D in horror, like modern, Valentine's got to be number one to me. It came out a little before Avatar, right? Did I have that wrong, or was it?
Did it? No.
No, it came out after.
I don't remember.
It's all good.
I know Cameron didn't like it. He was very adamant that this was the wrong use of 3D, and I get that, but you can have both. You can have things flying at you, and what was great about the 3D is like, you have a character come out on the porch with a shotgun. That's his idea because he knows he can put it right in the screen, and it's just like every day we were figuring we could do different things and utilize different things. It was very difficult back then because these were brand new cameras. They had been built for the movie. And so they were huge. They were the size of a refrigerator. So like when we were looking at vehicles to use, we had to use vehicles that were big enough to fit the refrigerator in the back seat. And so it just changed the way we shot, which was great, but also a lot of fun. Now they're tiny and you can do whatever you want.
How boring. I know the old way was a pain, but I actually liked the old way. It was I think that's kind of amazing. So you've done a lot of horror, and obviously you with Sean and all that stuff. So what is, like, I've doing this podcast, we've had a lot of people give us different reasons why they think the horror genre is special. Like, the closest thing I can come to it, besides the fact that it can be like, it can hit the highest part of your brain, but also the lowest part of your reptile brain all at the same time. But also, like, kind of contains, you can do a lot in the horror genre that is kind of like what other genres do, but when other genres try to do horror in their genre, it almost never works. What's special about the horror genre to someone who's worked in it their whole life and obviously appreciates and loves it? What do you think is special about the genre itself?
I mean, I think what is special and also unfair is that horror allows you the ability to do all of it. You can do humor, you can do action, you can do everything goes in horror. And so you have to learn and hone those skills so that you can do all of the different things. You can literally do a romantic comedy inside a horror movie. And you can't do a horror movie inside a romantic comedy. It doesn't work that way. So it's the only genre that allows itself to just morph and become whatever the audience needs or whatever the story needs. Nobody else can do that. And I think for me, that's what was the most fun, because it felt like there were no shackles. I could go anywhere I wanted and I could do anything I wanted. And it was, and what's great about the horror fans, they understand that and they'll go with you on that ride. A lot of times you'll watch a movie and you totally have to suspend your disbelief. You don't necessarily have to do that with horror because you're taking everyday life and you're throwing these crazy situations at it. And that's what was always fun for me. So I think that's what's most special.
That's really cool.
What's most unfair because it doesn't get credit for that.
And why is that? Is that the gatekeeping critics? What is the?
I mean, it's weird because when I started, you literally only had Dimension and New Line and a couple other places doing horror movie because everybody else thought it was beneath them.
Right.
And when Scream came out, everything changed because suddenly, well, wait, a movie can make 6 million and then end up making over 100 million. Everybody started doing it, but they still didn't all get it and didn't all like it. And I think even to this day, even though every TV station and every network and every cable, they all have horror now, there's still this idea that it's not posh.
That's totally true. It might actually be better that way. Although it sucks, but like they wouldn't understand it even if they're saying they were understanding it. So.
Yeah, and you only rarely get like those shows that like kind of creep in, like a Black Mirror comes up, and you're like, maybe people are gonna like horror, and then like you don't get another season for like 4 years, and then people are like, horror sucks. Why do you watch that garbage?
Let's go. What's the? This might be really hard to answer off the top of your head, but what's the best secret movie hidden inside a horror movie? So like you said, you could put a romantic comedy in a horror movie. So what's a really good example of another genre movie that's hiding inside a horror movie? I'm trying to think of one off the top.
I think you can do that with any horror movie. I think you can do it with you can do a buddy movie with American Werewolf. You can do. I mean, every movie has that element in it. It's just. I mean, you can name a movie and we could play that game and figure out what's going on there, and that's what makes it. I mean, I guess other genres can do that, but it certainly seems like when I watch horror, that's the one that really stands out. And it's not just that; it's that if we go back and look, Alien was a horror movie. It was called a sci-fi movie, but it's one of the scariest sci-fi movies you'll see. Just the inner concept of it goes against everything. It's almost like the vampire, where the vampire was sexual with the penetration. Aliens is the same thing. It's penetration through your mouth. I mean, everything about it is uncomfortable, and it's against your will. It's rape. It's all of those things in horror. And it's a horror movie called sci-fi. So I mean, the longer I've been around, the more I've come to appreciate horror for that very reason, because it can be everything.
And it feels different. Other genres can do it, but like when you have a thriller set up, something like, let's say, Red Dragon, right? And it feels like it's about to go horror, and then it goes back to thriller, it feels like it pulled a punch. But when horror goes Western, it doesn't feel like it's pulling a punch. It feels like it's having a blast.
Yeah.
Right? It's the way horror does it. It's not just that horror can do it and most other genres can't. It's also the way horror goes about it is just cooler, right, than the way the other genres do, I think. That's a really interesting point. I'm going to be looking for other pieces of movies like for the next week after this interview. Now I'll be like, hey, that's a mystery movie hiding in my horror movie.
What are you doing in there?
What are you doing in there?
Has there been, in your opinion, like a standout horror movie script, like I'd say like the past 10 years? Because I feel like we're in kind of like a strange decade for horror. Like we just got out of like the Conjuring verse sort of like type horror.
It got dark paranormal.
Yeah, it got dark paranormal. Like I guess where would you say we're at now?
We're at A24 now.
Yeah, we're in A24.
From all I can tell.
A24, it's a Blumhouse.
Yeah.
Has there been a script that stood out to you recently that you thought did a really good job that maybe people don't appreciate or know of?
Recently, I mean, I haven't read outside. What ended up happening was I stopped reading scripts because I wanted to enjoy the movie. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I'll read if a friend comes to me with a script and says, "Hey, can you check this out?" But for the most part, I mean, I can go back and because I would read movies before I would actually see them, and so I'm spoiling the movie. And so the older I got, I thought, you know what, I'm going to stop doing that. I kind of know how to write now. I can.
Smart, good for you. Time to go.
You know, I would rather go into the experience because I can't remember. I read some of the Halloween movies before they came out. I read the remake of Fright Night before it came out. A lot of things I wish I go back and I wish I hadn't done that.
Right.
But you know, that's as far as what would stand out. I mean, I can tell you what movies stood out to me, but as far as
well, you said experience. You wanted to experience the film. Which recent horror film was a good experience for you? So like for us, it was A Quiet Place. Like the whole theater was so quiet. We're like walking in like mice. Have you had one of those standout experiences recently with horror?
certainly Get Out stands out. Get Out was one that kind of blew my mind because it went in a direction I didn't know it was going to go, and that rarely happens.
Mhm.
Quiet Place is a great example because, I mean, pull that off. I mean, write a script that's that short and has so little dialogue. There's no exposition, so to speak. What else stands out? I mean, I can go back. Certainly, certainly the movies that I think about the movies that made me what I am.
Mhm.
It's movies that still to this day impact. It's Jaws. Jaws, everything about Jaws. It's still, if I go into the ocean, I think about it. It's this fleeting little thought in the back of my head. If I get in a pool sometimes and it's dark, I think about it. It had that kind of impact. And so, when I look back at the movies that impacted me the most, which maybe certainly Star Wars is one of those, but outside of that Star Wars world, there's not a lot of movies that sort of made me who I am. Aliens, Terminator, those movies, they had an impact. And Terminator is a monster movie.
Definitely.
And it's a really good one.
Yeah, definitely. That's the weird thing is because you get that a lot when you're online talking about horror. You get that dumb "this isn't horror" thing all the time. It drives us crazy. That's part of why we made the concept of this podcast broad, because there's a lot of dark theme things that we wanted to be able to talk about that quote unquote may not be considered horror, like a Seven or whatever. But I mean. What horror fan wouldn't like pieces of Jaws or Seven? That doesn't make any sense. There's no world where that should be.
Who doesn't want to claim the Terminator? Dorks, bring it over.
Exactly. And he was actually terrifying. That character was terrifying at the time. Terminator, the original, was so relentless that you didn't really experience something like that, at the time. It took people by surprise. RoboCop it had humor, so it didn't feel like kind of that relentless. But also RoboCop 2 is kind of horrific.
But to the Terminator thing, when Uber Jason comes out, he's shredded, and I guarantee half of the people who saw the movie thought of like the Terminator, like he looks like he's metal and he's gonna fuck you up.
Well, that's totally true.
Yeah, so Terminator, we're gonna scoot it over into horror for everyone. We're making the executive decision.
So we just did an episode on what were the best character introductions in the history of horror, right? And one of the ones that I picked was Quint. I just love the way Quint is brought onto screen with the sound of the fingernails, and then he's kind of the person who knows. As a writer, like, how much thought goes into the first time a character appears, or does it not work that way because there's so many changes and so many?
No, it's huge. I mean, it's everything, because there's two reasons for doing it. One is creatively, and the other is selfishly, because as a writer, an actor is going to get this script, and that actor is just going to flip to his or her part, and they're just going to see, how does this make me look? And so when you've got William Fichtner coming across a bridge at sort of materializing like High Plains Drifter, that is an introduction that and then the next thing he does is he's talking to some guy and he's like, "Hey, fat fuck." And so everything about him, from dialogue to his visual, it's important. So it's important to both the story and to the actor. And so it's a part of every moment. And for me, as far as a writer, it's every character that you meet. It's everybody I've ever written.
That's really interesting. I didn't think about the angle of you're shopping these out and the actors are reacting to it. It's also weird that High Plains Drifter has come up twice in a row.
That is crazy.
That was our last. It came up in our last week's episode too. I love that movie. It's one of my favorite westerns of all time, and I've been obsessed with it for a long time. And not just the character introductions, but as a horror fan, westerns, they have that really stark, bare atmosphere, and sometimes you're in a mood for that, whatever. But High Plains Drifter was it was like refracted through hammer visions some of the times, right? Like, it was just so unique. What a unique feeling movie.
Yeah, it was everything about it as having grown up watching the westerns. You go to that, and there's a reason John Wayne didn't like the movie, because it broke all of those Western rules.
Right.
And when I got out to LA, there was a guy named Dean Reisner who wrote High Plains Drifter, Dirty Harry. He wrote a bunch of those movies from that genre. And I remember him talking about it and how it was, because he ended up writing Play Misty for me, which was Eastwood's first directorial debut.
Yep.
So, there was a level of changing the rules that was going on at that time period. It was the cop who was the vigilante. It was, High Plains Drifter was the cowboy with the white hat who really didn't deserve to wear a white hat. I mean, everything about it was changing the genre, which I use every day when it comes to what I'm doing now, because I don't want to do just the same thing over and over. I want to take the character and stick him in space. But that's just me.
Totally. Well, and also it was the kind of the medium culmination of this was probably Unforgiven, but the movie started to make the audience complicit in it. Sopranos did the same thing, where because Clint Eastwood's character's on a revenge thing in High Plains Drifter, so you're sort of rooting for him to do it, but then the fact that you're rooting for him makes you sort of an awful human being. So it's more complicated. It was way simpler when you were rooting for John Wayne, heroic shots. There was no reason not to root for him in a lot of the movies he was doing. But High Plains Drifter, you rooted for him, and then afterwards you were like, is anyone going to find out I was rooting for him? Like, this is not good for me, right? And that's a really cool thing. I love that you use that now.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the main movies that we used for Drive Angry. It was the idea of both, not just Cage coming, but also the accountant showing up into a world that they no longer belong to.
No wonder I love Drive Angry.
It's all adding up.
I didn't detect that at all when I was watching it. I'm like, I love this movie. And now oh man, what other movies went into Drive Angry? It's probably a bunch of other shit I love.
All of the old road movies. You think of the old 1970s exploitation road movies.
So like Vanishing Point and stuff like that, or
all of that stuff we watched, constantly. You think about an RV running down the road being chased by devil worshippers. I mean, come on. That was clearly an influence.
That's a great point.
That's true.
I didn't even think of that.
Very true.
There was a subgenre of movie that I have this vaguest memory of, and the one that first comes to mind to me was Hooper, but it was also a lot of Evel Knievel stuff. There was like a stunt person kind of movie, like really small genre. But I remember like those really gritty car scenes from that kind of stuff.
It was like really dangerous.
They were. He's like they were. He's lost a lot of friends. Yeah, but there's a grit to that, and I think a lot of modern movies, when they try to duplicate it, it doesn't come off like that to me. But Drive Angry had it, which is one of the things I really appreciated.
I mean, we certainly wrote it with that in mind. We wrote it to be, sort of a love letter to those old, road movies. And we had been thinking, what's something we can do in 3D that we haven't seen yet. And so a car movie seemed to be a thing. But I think a part of that grittiness comes from the fact that we went into this thinking we had a lot more money than we had. And so we hit the ground running, and then, the trailer that carries the car shows up, and it was built in 1950. And so everything about it was us trying to figure out how to get around the money that we didn't have. Right. And there's certainly one scene that takes place in a church. A week and a half before that scene, it took place outside on it was a car wreck that they drive up on, and then suddenly everybody involved in the car wreck has guns. We were going to have a rain day, and we didn't have in the budget, the time to do something else. We had to shoot that day. So we put everything into a church, and it was just a mad scramble. And what I loved about Drive Angry is we didn't have the money to throw at it any problem. We had to just outthink our way through it. So we found this old church that was already sinking in the mud. And it rained the whole time, but everybody was inside the church. And so all of that was, it was rewritten just so that it would, and by the way, I think it plays better now because it's in a
I can't imagine another way. That's so weird that it was awesome. A whole nother thing before, because I love those epic scenes. That's the very first thing that comes to my mind when I think of Kill Bill, is those church confrontation, moments, and that I'm so glad it went that way. I was rooting for you to have more money, but now I'm like, I'm glad you were. I'm glad
I'll always remember, and every movie you pick up something that you forget about. Like you'll write lines as a writer, and then you kind of expect that they're going to change, that the actor will come in and change them. Because I certainly have done it to myself. And I remember Billy Burke came in, who played, Bella's father in the Twilight movies.
Mm-hmm.
He comes in and he walks in, and I had written a lot of slang into the movie, a lot of accent, and he was one of those guys who would come in and completely take your dialogue and make it his own, but with his own sort of cadence. He's like, Milton, isn't it? And I spelt in it, I spelt in it.
Sure.
He said it the same way, Milton, isn't it? And I was just like, that's fun. That's really nice. Because a lot of people won't do that. He'd come in, Milton, isn't it?
Just crushing it.
He'll do it with us. Crisp English. Hit every consonant. That's no good. What's a great change to something that besides this one where an actor came in and took dialogue and changed it and you were like, wow, that's really, I never expected that. Is there another example of when that happened? Because I love looking for those in movies.
Certainly. I mean, Cage did that with everything. Cage was one of those guys who would walk in and he would give you what was written on the page, and then he would go, Cage.
Right.
There was a scene where he's standing next to a barrel of fire, and I forget the exact dialogue, but it was something like, "Look, the fire's not the hard part of going." He's not saying go to hell, but fire's not the worst part. The worst part is you're watching your loved ones suffer, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. And he's like, "I watched this cult kill my daughter and take her child." That's not exactly what he said. First, he said, "I watched him take my daughter, rip her head off with a butter knife."
A little different.
That is so
It
good.
doesn't make it to the movie.
Right. Totally. I mean, there's just moments where I just saw this amazing clip of Sam Elliott reminiscing about his movies, and they asked him about playing the dude, playing the narrator in Big Lebowski, and he goes, I sat down in it was the last day of the movie, and I'm talking to the camera, and I'm saying like my lines, or whatever, and I did it like 8-9 times, and then finally I turned to the Coen Brothers, and I'm thinking to myself, I fucking nailed this like 3 times. It's like, he turned to me, he's like, "You gotta tell me what you fucking want here, because I really feel like I'm nailing it." They're like, "Oh yeah, you got it the second take. We just love watching you do it." which is just great. Like, what, I would do the same thing with Nicolas Cage. I'd just be like, just go.
Well, it's interesting because every actor is different, and I've seen this from the very beginning. It's especially actors who've been doing it for a while. So it's not like, "Oh, I'm in a movie," and they're just doing their thing for the first time. You saw it with Cage. Cage would come in, he would do his lines, and then he was ready to go home. Like, he would do a take, and then, "Okay, can we go?" It wasn't like that, but he would stay and do more. But you could tell there was I just nailed that, so when you're ready, I'm going to leave. not in a bad way, but he was very professional. He came, he delivered what he was meant to deliver. Yeah. Then you had somebody like Billy, who would come in and read the line that was written in the way that fit for him, and then he would tweak it just the tiniest bit each time, looking for the perfect delivery for him. And then you had Bill Fichtner, who would still be there today shooting over and over, and he'll try this and he'll try that.
Who's an actor you have yet to work with, like, you really, really want to get in a movie? Like, what's someone you really admire that?
I mean, that's almost a sad thing, because as you're writing, you always have somebody in your head.
Of course.
Like, I can, off the top of my head, we wrote something for Clancy Brown. I've never worked with Clancy Brown, but how would you not want to write with a Kurgan?
Right.
So, there's people like that all along the way. We wrote, Dean Lorey and I wrote this thing with Clint Eastwood in mind ages ago. There's no way he would do it now, but there's no way he did it then. you know, but a thriller horror with Clint Eastwood as the lead, that just would have been amazing. I wrote something.
Oh, so sad that never happened.
I wrote a horror with Jodie Foster in mind. I wrote, so it happens all the time. You write for a certain actor. It doesn't have to be that, but you sort of envision who this person would be and how they would deliver the story you're trying to deliver. So it's always, and then some of them pass away, and you're like, damn, I'll never get the chance to. Like Patrick and I worked on a remake for The Exorcist. And the plan was to bring Max Vaughn back in to play the age that he played way back then.
Sure.
And, it just never happened, and now he's gone. So, I mean, what can you do?
Yeah.
But, J.T. Walsh, remember him?
Yeah.
Phenomenal actor. I would have loved to write something for him. So, I got a whole list of actors.
Well, you hear writers say that, but it makes so much sense. So what is it even like writing? So what's the writing process? Are you alone? Do you change it up and you write out? Do you have a writing spot? Like, how does this work for a writer? How do you approach it?
I mean, it's changed over the years. In the beginning, I would marathon write. I would walk around and it would stew in my head, and then I would sit down and write the whole thing in however long it takes. I could write a script in a week, but that didn't mean I necessarily wrote it in a week. I wrote it in my head, and then I'm just spitting it out on paper. That changed when I had a child, because suddenly, the baby crawls in the room and you're like, oh, I would rather be doing this. And so you do it. So that led me to getting an office so that I could go away from the house and write. And then I built this silly shed, and it's got a desk where I can stand. And so I kind of prefer writing while I'm standing. So I end up working here with my tools. But I mean, I can still write whenever. It doesn't matter. It's like something can interrupt me. That didn't used to be the case. When used to you'd interrupt me, I couldn't get back into it. But now, I think it comes with age. You just, you got to get it done, and so I can write wherever and whenever.
Right, and the 10,000 hour things. I mean, once you do it enough times, you can be writing in the middle of a concert, everyone else is cheering, you're writing away.
Yeah, and I mean, I never liked the Starbucks idea. I can do it, but I never liked that. It felt like that was more about me. I would walk in and everybody would look up to see who I was, and then go back to writing. But I can certainly write anywhere. But it's always been. I mean, it's just the idea that I get to write every day and get paid for it. Now, granted, there's been a year or two that were bad, but for the most part, I've always paid my bills with being a writer, and a lot of people can't say that. So I am blessed and I am lucky.
No, that's so cool. It's really amazing because the writers, that was we had a side project that we worked on for a bit where we were doing not horror movies, and we ended up doing Robert Altman's The Player, and I'll never forget that kind of scene where they just tossed the writers away. Basically, the studio exec is like, we don't even need writers. Let's just create a headline from the paper. He's like, union protest thing is like, it's right there, we got a story, who needs. And they're writers are so undervalued, but it's you can't, I mean, they bring so much of what is happening in the movie that's no other force can bring it to that. And I don't know, the fact that you've been able to do it and always stick to it is just an amazing accomplishment to me.
Well, thank you. It's had its ups and downs.
I'm sure. The fact that I started that little mini rant with the word devalue was a bad sign for the rosy sailing of the whole process, I'm sure.
I mean, I have no regrets. I mean, I don't think I'm very good at anything. I grew up in construction, and since we all been on lockdown, I've done 14 years worth of home improvement in the last so I can actually still do construction. I didn't know that, but for the most part, I would just rather be writing, rather be telling stories. I mean, going back to when I was a kid, I was the one around the campfire telling the stories. So that's all I ever wanted to do. I never thought about being rich. I just thought about making enough that I can keep doing it.
Right, and because a lot of people get bounced out and they don't get to do it, and that's incredible. What is it like in this time for a person involved in filmmaking and kind of this process? The pandemic is such a weird moment. So, like, first of all, there's got to be a lot of logistical changes and things that are happening, and then also, horror is really good at reflecting what's happening in society. So is that starting to feed into what you're doing or what the people around you are thinking about working on, or is there do we need more time lag before that kind of comes in?
I mean, I think you can't ignore what's happening right now. I think it is a part. It's certainly a part. It's certainly a part with production. I'm listening to friends and my fiance's leaving to go do a show, and the prep that they're having to do, and the lockdown once they get there, to wait for 10 days to a week, everything changes. The way you shoot changes. You wouldn't shoot you two that close together anymore. You couldn't do it. You have to separate, at least right now. And all of that changes. The scripts that 7 months ago were supposed to be going forward right now are not going forward right now for a couple of reasons. One, because of the lockdown. Two, because as they are written, you simply can't shoot them now. You can't. I wrote a rock biopic, which was tremendous fun, but this was a band that was predominantly a stage band. They were, big concerts. How do you shoot that? And how do you get that many people in a crowd cheering? Even if you fake it and you just have the first 2 or 3 rows, how do you do that? So everything changes in today's world. Horror and independent film is probably in great shape right now because they've always been small crews. They've always tried to keep the budget down so it's not, big explosions and big this and big that. So I feel like if you're in the indie world, you have a better chance right now than you ever had. Just be smart about it.
That's so interesting. Well, plus, and like you were saying, you have the muscles built up of problem solving around obstacles and budget constraints, and that plays out now where you're like, other people don't know how to get around. It's the thing I used to joke about. Like one of the reasons I appreciated old music, like a Robert Johnson blues singer, who's one of my favorites, right? This guy could just roll out into a crossroads in the middle of an intersection, in the middle of a town, pull out a guitar and entertain the shit out of a big group of people. But you get modern performers, like a K-pop band can't go out in the middle of the intersection unplugged and like entertain people, right? Like they need the support of a bunch of other stuff. And I feel like indie horror could just get out in the center of town and just start entertaining.
Yeah, and there's no better time for it. It's and I see friends who are doing it, and I think because the thing that we tend to forget is everybody needs content and they're running out.
Yeah.
So I can't go out and shoot a big biopic, but I can go shoot a smart, character-driven thriller or horror.
Like Host.
Yeah, that's such a good point. That's really. I remember thinking. So one of my touchstone horror films is Night of the Comet. I don't know if you've seen this movie, but I love this movie, right? And those desolate downtown LA shots and all that stuff. Well, we're in LA, and it just looks like that all the time now, right? Minus the red comet dust and empty clothes on the ground. But I feel like the world looks kind of like what I was growing up with indie horror more now than it ever did, which is. It's a really fascinating kind of juxtaposition. There's got to be weird opportunities that are cropping up now.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I have a thing at Netflix, and it's based on a comic book that F.J. DeSanto and I wrote, and the latest draft came in, and that draft there was always sort of a virus element to it, but that virus has been altered to sort of more mimic what we're going through now, which I like that it's not, hey, this is COVID, but it's something that you watch it and it's not in your face. It's very subtle and in the background, but it's certainly, so it shows what we're going through today, which is basically what we as writers tend to do. We just take the crap that's happened to us and hope that it relates to you, and that if it's happened to you, and if it hasn't, it's something you can sidestep because you've learned from our mistakes.
That's really interesting.
True.
Well, I know how to sidestep killer androids in space now, so
you dirty rat.
You've armed me for in case that ever crops up in my life.
Well, we were talking before we recorded, and it hit me that the last movie that I had intentions of going to go see was a midnight screening of Jason X at the Secret Cinema. here in LA, and
Because we had just caught Invisible Man, and then I think the next week you were going to see that. Or
yeah,
was
we
it-
were gonna go see that.
Yep.
So I need to go. We need this to happen. So everyone just start put on the goddamn mask.
Right,
I need to
exactly.
see it.
Everyone-
It's been so long since I've been to the movie theater. I need to go do it because I've only ever seen it on the DVD.
Oh, you've never seen Big
I've
Screen?
never seen it on the big screen.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Yeah, I know that. And you were this close. God damn it.
This very close.
I saw it on the big screen at Universal, huge theater with about 3 people.
Oh, man.
Well, I'll tell you this: when we went to the Secret Cinema, because we went there to go see what did we see there?
It was an older movie. Life Force?
Life Force.
We saw
Life Force.
Yeah.
They played the trailer for Jason X, and the whole fucking place lit up. And I was like,
Yeah.
it was the first time I was able to go, my people.
Like in a theater. These are my...
Did you get names and numbers?
No. Next time, we know.
We'll get them in the Facebook group.
Yeah, next time we will. Because we had seen Jason Lives in a theater that was similar to that, and
Yes.
I was really excited to see. Well, our Jason Lives screening had a mishap.
You would have been disappointed with
Yeah,
this Jason.
your Jason was better than the Jason we encountered.
They had this big guy with the pole, like looking like Jason beginning the film, and he walks up on stage, and then misses and just eats concrete, and everyone's like, "So we saw Jason get up." Everyone, Kane Howard would have been pissed.
Yeah, Kane would have been so upset. We saw Jason get up and do slapsticks.
And he slapstick stuff.
Inadvertently. But no, this is
wonderful.
This has been amazing. We really appreciate you taking the time, because one of the things that was really key to me for, one of the things that Halloween Weekly was trying to do was show people that horror has all these different variations, and the fact that like Jason X is one thing and Valentine's another thing, and Drive Angry, I can't imagine a horror fan not enjoying that movie. Like,
Right.
It just doesn't make any sense, because it's so gonzo, and a lot of that DNA of what you're talking about the old road movies and the grindhouse and the exploitation, all that is such an overlap with what horror is, right? It's just been such an amazing thing to talk to you and kind of hear the stories of what it was like to make this stuff.
It's kind of wild. Like, if I could time travel, I'd be like, "Yeah, Nick, the interview went great. You had a great time."
You were gonna time travel anyway.
Yeah, if I time travel, that's what I would do. I would do this.
You gotta time travel and tell young Nick that you're gonna meet the person who wrote the movie that got you into horror. Like, are you kidding me?
That is true. In fact, because of that DVD, I remember the next day people started quizzing me because the special features had the Freddy versus Jason, even a little Leatherface in there. And I remember kids the next day would quiz me on horror movies, and I knew every fucking answer to them. I was like, "Oh, the guy with the knives? That's Freddy Krueger." So like, I went in there like a fucking horror whiz, like in one day.
You're like a horror professor.
Yeah, I was a professor of horror at
this one-
Schaefer Middle School.
from this one thing.
I personally love that the movie that got me hated got you love.
It is. We fought for it. In fact, we did an episode probably 3 months ago called "You Watched Jason X Wrong," and then we just go and we just fucking fight for it.
It was literally an hour of us just like, you people are idiots. Come on now. Like that was the thing was. And there's this great moment. There's a guy I like. I don't know what his real name is, but he calls himself Cinema Snob. He's on YouTube and he's playing a character, so he's like whatever. But there's this moment in when he's going through Jason X where he cuts back and he shows the scene. I can't do justice to it. It's amazing. But he shows a clip of Pamela Voorhees and he's like, remember when Pamela Voorhees, that wrenching speech about like losing her son and being like whatever. He's like, and then it cuts to Jason X. He's like, "Oh yeah, ninja android against zombie Jason, bitch." He's like, forget that. He's like, this is amazing. You just can't lose with that concept.
It's a win-win.
It's absolutely amazing.
It's a win-win.
Is there anything you want people to check out that's currently out or coming up? Anything we should throw into this episode before we end this?
Nah, just tell them to wear a mask and vote.
It's
What do you do with that?
We're 1,000% with you. It's wear a mask and vote and get Nick back into a theater so he can enjoy
Exactly.
Jason X.
First one. I'm going to email the Secret Cinema Club. Be like, that better be the first.
Have you done the drive-ins yet?
Not yet. I don't think there's been. We haven't actually looked up which ones are close.
So we have a friend who's in the business, and he's a dear friend. He's been on the podcast. He just sent me a. I don't even know what those things are called from the chairs, but something from Paul Schrader. I love this guy, but he has somehow been to every drive-in that exists.
Yeah, I don't know how he's doing it.
In the last month,
While working on movies, he's
Right.
like swabbing people's noses and then like heading up all the drive-ins.
Yeah,
He's a
it's
madman.
absolutely amazing. But I've been tracking him to be like, where are the good drive-ins? I gotta go check these out. Is there a drive-in you can recommend? Have you been to?
No, I haven't. I keep meaning to do it, but at the time when everybody started going back to drive-ins, like I did nothing but build crap around here in the yard. And
Right.
then when suddenly everybody started going to drive-ins, I was like, "This is a great idea." And then I got busy, so I've been writing nonstop for a month and a half.
Well, that's a good reason.
Yeah, that's a good reason to do whatever. But I'm excited to go have the drive-in experience because
It's been a long time. You know what's funny? I think the last movie I saw in the drive-in, Lost in Space.
Go figure. You just came full circle.
Eating the enemies and
All right, wear a mask, go to a drive-in, reappreciate Jason X. That's the good.
Live a good life.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do
It's
this.
been
We
my
really
pleasure.
appreciate it. Wonderful to meet you. Stay safe over there and keep writing. Keep being amazing.
All right, you guys take care.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.